Hello and welcome everyone to the Intrepid Museum's live virtual programming. Thank you so much for joining us today for Codebreakers. My name is Alicia and I'm an educator at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum here in New York City, and I'll be your host today for the program. Just as a reminder, the museum's live streams are free, and if you'd like to support us in delivering this exciting new content, please do click on the link in the comments or in the description below. So feel free to use the chat today if you'd like to engage with us. Say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know if you've ever been to the Intrepid Museum before. And of course, if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them there as well. So at the Intrepid Museum, our mission is to honor our heroes, educate the public, and inspire our youth. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about spying and espionage. We're going to talk a little bit about the ways that the Navy could communicate while at sea, and also how we kept pilots safe by keeping them somewhat hidden from plain sight. Also keeping the information that they might be carrying safe by encoding it as well. So a quick recap for those of you who may not be familiar. This is the Intrepid Museum. We are located inside of a historic World War II aircraft carrier docked right on the west side of Manhattan in the Hudson River. And on site, we also have a lot of historic Cold War era things. We've got the submarine. We've also got a space shuttle Enterprise on the flight deck, and also a British Airways Concorde too. So a lot of really fun things to come check out. Now, I will say it was constructed way back in 1943 for a very specific purpose. You know, it was made at a time when we were fighting countries all the way across oceans, and it became really important to be able to bring our airplanes with us very, very far away. So while we were fighting these battles, we, of course, were at sea. We needed a way to launch and land planes while we were in the middle of the ocean, and thus the aircraft carrier was born. So the USS Intrepid is an aircraft carrier. It was in service from 1943 to 1974. It served in World War II, the Cold War, and the Vietnam War. And then later, after it was decommissioned, it was rescued from the scrapyard and turned into a museum. And actually now next year, we will be celebrating our 40th birthday as a museum. Can you imagine? So really, really wonderful. Now, of course, while at sea, the Navy wanted to protect its aviators and its ships. We wanted to keep them safe while they were off on their dangerous missions. And one way that they could do this was by hiding them in plain sight. So tell me in the chat, does anyone know what that is called when something is right in front of you, but still kind of hard to see? Maybe it uses a certain color to help to blend in with its surroundings, or, maybe it just, it might have some patterns or something. A lot of animals might use this. And I'll say the military did too. So in order to disguise these huge, huge hunks of metal, we use something called, and yes, I see it in the chat there, camouflage. Yes. Now, this can be done with colors or patterns or all sorts of designs. And if you know any, let me know in the chat. What are some animals maybe that might use camouflage in order to protect themselves? Can you think of any animals? Pop them in the chat for me if you can think of any animals that might use camouflage. And hey, by the way, while we're looking at this picture, did you happen to see the hunter who is hiding in plain sight in this image here? Can you find it? Give you a couple of seconds. All right, and here he is. There he is, hiding right up against the tree. That's great. Yes, I see Chameleon, says Santos in the chat. Wonderful. So yeah, now there are actually a few different types of camouflage that we're going to talk about today. The first is commonly found in the animal world, of course, and also it's commonly what we think of when you think of that military camo pattern. And this is something called obscuring camouflage. So this means that you are blending in using similar colors or patterns as your surrounding area. So that hunter that you saw before was a great example of that. Another great example that we can find in the nature world is, of course, a flounder. So you can see this picture here, this flounder that's hiding. He's got colors and patterns that help him to really, really disguise himself with the ocean floor, all that sand. So do you see him there? There he is. So that sandy color, again, looks exactly like the sand that he's swimming over. So that's going to help to protect him. Now, another example of this that we can see in nature is the snowshoe hare. During the warmer months, it has a brown coat of fur to help to blend in with its woody and grassy surroundings. But then once the snow starts to fall and it gets a little bit colder up there in the Arctic, its fur actually turns white so it can blend in with all of that snow and its surroundings. So it's a really, really great example of adaptation here, and of course, obscuring camouflage. So that is the first one. Now, the next one we can talk about is disruptive camouflage. Look at this picture. What is going on here? So this is using some highly contrasting colors and patterns to confuse people, to confuse your onlookers. So a great example of this in nature is zebras. This picture is so crazy. They often travel in herds of hundreds or even thousands at a time, and those really distinct stripes help to confuse their predators. So where, looking at this picture, where does one zebra end and the next even begin? And how many are in this herd? It's very confusing just looking at it, even just looking at this picture. Also, when they're all moving, it helps to create this optical illusion that also sort of messes with the perceived direction of the movement, too. So you can imagine how that would be really helpful for the zebras in order to outlast a lion, for example. So that's disruptive camouflage. The next one we've also got is countershading camouflage. Now, that's a really popular one for some of our airplanes. That is using different colors or patterns on the top and the bottom in order to blend in both from above and from below. So oftentimes the top part's going to be darker, and then the bottom part will be a bit lighter. And a great example of this is penguins. So right in this picture, you can see these penguins have dark backs and white bellies, so they can blend in really well with the darkness of the ocean. But then also, first of all, when the predators are looking down at them, they blend in with the ocean there. But if they also have this white belly, when the predators are looking up at them and they're swimming up near the light of the sky coming through the water, that's a great way for them to blend in too. So many other animals have this countershading camouflage, things like dolphins and sharks and whales, very common when you look at ocean animals specifically too. Now, the last one that we can talk about is mimicry. And mimicry is literally copying what something looks like in order to look and appear like that thing, almost like you're wearing a costume, kind of. So you aren't blending in necessarily. I mean, you are sometimes, but you're basically putting on a mask, kind of, and saying, "All right, I am this thing. This is my costume. I am becoming this thing." So often that means you might want to look like something a little scarier than yourself, maybe to protect yourself, or maybe something that's also super non-threatening or not super delicious to eat necessarily. So a really great example of this you can see here is in some butterflies and moths that have this color pattern that kind of look like eyes on their wings. And looking at that, yeah, it really does kind of look like the eyes of an owl, doesn't it? So that's a really helpful way to scare away someone who might want to eat them. And then on the other hand, you've also got bugs that can disguise themselves to look like pieces of nature. So sure, they blend in like obscuring because they might be that green color, but they also literally look exactly like a stick or a leaf, like you can see here. This is actually a bug that has adapted to look exactly like a leaf. Isn't that wild? So they mimic the nature that they are living in. So they're actually really easily looked over in that case and can live to tell the tale to their little bug friends another day because they aren't eaten. So it's a very helpful adaptive thing that they've been able to establish here. So I am now going to show you a few things in the museum, and we are going to get a chance to see how camouflage was used in a number of different ways while on board the Intrepid. And the first image that I want to show you is this one here. It's actually two images. The top one is an illustration of the bottom one. Now, the Intrepid is a giant ship. It is 913 feet long. It is so long that you could play 3 games of football on top of the flight deck at the exact same time. So, yeah, you can imagine it's going to be a little difficult to camouflage this giant floating airport in the middle of the ocean. So, how did we do it? Well, if you look at this picture, believe it or not, this is the Intrepid in 1944. This is how it was painted during World War II. So this is a form of camouflage called dazzle paint. Dazzle paint. So you can see these blocks of color that they painted on the side. The colors that they used were called dull black, ocean gray, and light gray. All right, so here is a question, everyone, and we're going to play a little game. Which type of camouflage do you think dazzle paint is? Which type of camouflage is this? So go ahead and type your answer for me in the chat. If you think that dazzle paint is obscuring, type a 1. If you think it's disruptive, type 2. If you think it's counter shading, type 3. And if you think it's mimicry, type 4. So think about all of those animals that we just talked about. Take a look at this picture. All right, so I see we've got some answers coming in. Excellent. What kind of camouflage do you think dazzle paint is? Very interesting. Think about where it's going to actually be in, when it's out in the ocean, right? Think about what's around it, the colors that are around it, the patterns around it. And which one do you think it is? Type a 1, 2, 3, or 4 for me. All these large blocky shapes on it. What could that mean? All right, my friends. So if you said 2, disruptive, you would be right. So it is, in fact, using disruptive camouflage. Now, that is because it would often travel in its own herd, kind of like zebras. It traveled in a fleet, and they were all painted in this really crazy pattern, just like this. So when they were all close together to one another, it was a little tricky to know where one ended and where the next one began, and even oftentimes which direction they were heading at if you were just to glance up at it. So after World War II, of course, the Intrepid was painted in this low visibility gray that you can see on the left, kind of plain. That's what it looks like today if you were to go visit the museum. But back then, a lot of ships actually looked like this dazzle paint, this black and white stuff and gray. And it's confusing, right? Like, look at that picture. Is this one ship? Is it 2 ships? Is it 3 ships? Who knows? It's very, very confusing if you aren't actually there and seeing it a little bit more closely. And now here are some other really, really bonkers examples of dazzle paint. You've got stripes, you've got swirls, you've got zigzags, all kinds of things to confuse people. And it's really an optical illusion too. That one on the top left looks like there's a whole bunch of pieces jutting out from it. And that's just because our eyes are playing tricks on us. So this was used actually even back in World War I, by the way, too, even before World War II. So all in all, they figured, yeah, you've got this huge ship sailing through the water. There's no way we're going to be able to blend in with the ocean entirely. So best bet, might as well confuse them. And that's what they did. Now, here is another type of camouflage, everyone. Take a look at this plane. Now, if you've ever been to the museum before, or if you've ever seen one of our other programs, you've probably seen this plane before. This is actually my favorite plane. It is the oldest plane in the collection. This is also from World War II. This is the Avenger, and it is a torpedo bomber. All right, so when we look at the Avenger and we look at its patterns and its colors, what type of camouflage do we think this one is using? So once again, if you think it's obscuring, type 1. If you think it's disruptive, type 2. If you think it's counter shading, type 3. And if you think it's mimicry, type 4. So which type of camouflage is the Avenger using? So go ahead, type your answer in the chat, type in your best guess. Really take a look here. Take a look at that color scheme on the Avenger. What do you think? Which kind of camouflage is this? Thinking about our nature world and maybe some animals that might also reflect this pattern too. All right, so everyone, let me know your final guesses. And the answer is counter shading. Very nice. I see that in the chat as well. Excellent. So this plane uses counter shading, and it's actually got 3 colors involved in its counter shading. The top part of it is a very dark blue. The middle part of the fuselage, the main body part there, is a lighter blue. And then the underside is white. So thinking about that, what do you think it's trying to blend in with? What do you think the dark blue color is for? What does that blend in with? And then why the lighter shade of blue and why the white underneath? And, think about those penguins too, right? And also, as you can see here, sharks too. Sharks are another great example of this counter shading. And they also kind of have 3 colors that sort of graduate down to that lighter color there too. So thinking about that, we can say, okay, yeah, the top dark blue part blends in really well with the dark blue color of the ocean. So if you are above the plane looking down at it, it's going to blend in really well with the ocean underneath it. If you're flying alongside of it, because of course we're in the air, it's going to be blue, kind of like the sky. Hopefully it's a nice day, so it'll really be blue. And then if you're underneath it looking up, it's going to blend in with the clouds. So Avengers are actually a really, really good example of counter shading. Great job, everyone. All right, now here is another example of camouflage. Take this one in here. This is the MiG-21. So a very, very fast jet plane that we've got up on our flight deck. This one's actually a Vietnamese plane. You can see the roundel in the back, the red and yellow roundel in the back there is the symbol for Vietnam. And this plane would have been flown, of course, during the Vietnam War. So when we look at the MiG-21, you can also see it's got some pretty distinct coloring on it. So what type of camouflage is this one using? Once again, in the comment section, if you think it is obscuring, type 1, type 2 for disruptive, type 3 for counter shading, and type 4 for mimicry. Which type? And really think about what we talked about earlier. Look at some of the characteristics here. Think about where it might be flying. And tell me, again, what type of camouflage you think this MiG-21 is using. So it has this green coloring at the top. It's also kind of light on the bottom. Tricky, tricky. All right, everyone. So, wonderful answers coming in the chat here. Excellent. All right, so everyone, the answer is counter shading. Again, you would be correct if you said counter shading. Now, if you said obscuring, you might be right as well, because it is kind of blending in with something. It does sort of look like that jungle camo pattern that you might have seen. But most specifically, again, this one is counter shading because of where it's going to be flying. It flies over the jungles in Vietnam, right? So it's going over the trees. So when you're looking down, it's going to blend in with the trees underneath it. But again, if you're down on the ground and you're looking up, it's going to blend in a bit better with the sky and the clouds. So a little bit of a trick question there, but it's kind of a cool looking plane there, isn't it, with all that pattern on it? Now, right next to it on the flight deck is this one. This is the MiG-17, now also a Vietnamese plane, and we like to say it's kind of like the little brother of the MiG-21. It's a little bit of a different type of plane, but really look closely at this one now. This one is a little bit different. Which kind of camouflage do you think this one is? The MiG-17. Is this obscuring, disruptive, counter shading, or mimicry? So go ahead and type your answer, the number in the chat for me here. And on this one, I want you to look at the patterns in the colors on this plane. Think about where it might be trying to blend in. I'll give you a little background on this plane. This one was a little slower than the MiG-21. This was a fighter jet. So it's going to be fighting other planes up in the sky, zipping around. And because it's going to be in the sky and maneuvering around in the clouds, it's painted not only to blend in with the sky, but maybe also the clouds too. So get those answers in for me. Let's see, which one do you think is this obscuring, disruptive, counter shading, or mimicry? 1, 2, 3, or 4. All right, everyone. So let's see. If you said obscuring, you would be correct. So this one actually hides itself in plain sight in the sky using all of these different shades of blue. And here's some examples of it as you might see it flying in the sky as well. Or, of course, maybe you might not see it so well if it's doing its job. So you can really see how the colors and the patterns can help to obscure or hide that plane in the sky. On the left, you can see it kind of, blends in with that the doppled kind of pattern of the clouds up there. And on the right, the blue color really does blend in with that blue sky. Excellent, excellent. All right, now here's our last one. Right next to the MiG-17, we've got this plane. This is the Crusader, another very, very fast supersonic jet. This was flown by the United States Navy. And if you notice, this one's got kind of an interesting thing painted on it. Now, maybe you've seen something like this painted on a plane before. So, of course, yes, we are looking at a shark face on the front of this jet. So I want you to use your imaginations a little bit here and tell me one last time, which type of camouflage do you think the Crusader is using? Is this obscuring? Is this disruptive? Is this counter shading? Or is this mimicry? Type a 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat for me. And let me know which one you think. Which type of camouflage is the closest anyway, do you think? And, some people say, well, this one doesn't really use camouflage at all. But again, use your imagination here. Which do you think this is? If we, we're really thinking about this, how might this plane kind of hide in plain sight? So everyone looking at this one, we might think Okay, yeah, maybe it's kind of mimicking a certain animal, right? Because it looks like a shark. It's mimicking a shark, kind of, right? You'd use your imagination a little bit on that one. And yeah, so, I'd say sharks are pretty fierce. I'm pretty scared of sharks. And so it does kind of look like a shark, maybe flying through the sky like a sharknado. You think so? Okay, maybe not. Maybe not really. It doesn't really look like a shark, but it would certainly, I think, scare some of the pilots who might be flying alongside of it and looking over and seeing this shark face and these teeth on the side of it, right? So it does its job in order to scare away the enemies, right? All right. Now, here's some other animals that do that too. Snakes, also something that I'm not a huge fan of. Now, on the left, we have a coral snake. The coral snake is very, very dangerous. It is very, very poisonous. And there is a saying that can help you to remember that: red touches yellow, kills a fellow. Now, there's another snake, the scarlet king snake, that looks very, very similar to the coral snake. In fact, it's got almost exactly the same colors. So when you are out and about in the woods, as you might be, and you see these colors, your first reaction might be, oh no. But if you look a little bit closely, the scarlet king snake has a slightly different pattern on it. And on this one, the red is actually touching the black, not the other way around. So the rest of the rhyme goes: red touches black, poison lack, or also red touches black, friend of Jack. So that means that you can tell that the king snake is going to be safe because the red sections are touching the black bands. The coral snake is not safe because, again, red touches yellow, kills a fellow. So the red is touching the yellow bands on there. But they do look so, so, so similar and are very, very commonly confused too. So this is just one example of a snake mimicry where, you've got this harmless species, it won't hurt humans, the scarlet king snake. Has actually evolved to mimic the visual cues of a very dangerous one so that predators won't eat it, which is really, really, really smart. So everyone, I want to pause here just for a second and see if we have any questions before we move on. Any questions at all? So let's see. Why did the Avenger need camouflage? Great question. So the Avenger, everyone, again, was part of, it was during World War II. It's an older plane, and it's a torpedo bomber. And that means that it is a big, huge, heavy plane. It has to carry these really, really heavy torpedoes, of course. And as a result, it actually flew pretty slow. That was how they actually operated. They flew low and slow. You've got your ship here that you want to do a torpedo on, and it's coming in low and slow. And right before it gets real close, it drops that torpedo in so it can go skimming under the surface there and, go boom. But when it does that, it flies away very quickly. So it has to maintain that speed low and slow in order to make sure that the torpedo will also go in that way as well. So it's not one of these planes that's zipping around in the air really quickly. It has to go slow and be in plain sight quite a bit. So it's very important for the Avenger to be camouflaged because it's going to be so close to these ships and so close to these other planes that we're going to be flying around nearby. So the Avenger in particular, any plane that's going to be, a slower plane or something that's going to be flying a little bit closer to the surface is something that needs to be camouflaged in particular. Because again, it's hiding in plain sight. So excellent question. And let's see what else. Did all planes use camouflage? No. So we are actually, saw a couple just now. So we have the planes like the Avenger that do have camouflage. That was important. But as I kind of mentioned, the jet planes didn't really need camouflage. They're all painted these just kind of gray color because they go so fast that by the time somebody, can target them or something, it's really at that point they can get away very quickly. So there are, some markings on it. Again, you've got the shark face, you've got some other insignia like, lightning bolts and lizards and things like that we talk about on some of the other planes. But those aren't really camouflage. I mean, I guess, again, you could say it's sort of mimicry, but they don't really need full out camouflage the same way that some of these other planes that were going a little bit slower from the past. You've got Hellcats and the Avengers and all these other planes that were flying around that were blue because they were out in the ocean and they wanted to blend in a bit better. But as technology progressed, camouflage became a little bit less of an important thing for these planes because the planes just got a lot faster. All right. So everyone, we are going to continue on now. The the Intrepid's flight deck has a lot of really amazing planes on it. And this is just another one of them. This isn't one that uses camouflage. Again, here's another example of a plane that didn't really need to use camouflage because of its purpose, too. So this one doesn't need to blend in and hide. This one actually is trying to stand out and be a little bit more noticeable. This one is called the Mentor, and it's called that because it was used as a training plane. So it was used to train pilots to fly in the Navy back in the 50s. And this is a really great way to think of it actually is if you've ever taken driver's ed or, seen someone practicing driving a car going down the street, usually there's some sort of way to designate that they are a student driver. So they might, put a sticker or a sign, maybe on the top of the roof or something like that, just so that people can know, hey, this person's learning how to drive. So maybe watch out, be nice, maybe avoid them just in case something goes terribly wrong. But this is also, why I learned to drive in an empty parking lot. So we have these visual cues that can also tell us, be careful. Red is one of those colors that really can, catch our eye here. But this is the same idea here with the Mentor. They painted it this bright red and white color because it's very, very visible up in the sky. You want to be able to see it and know, all right, there is someone training how to fly on this plane, and maybe don't want to fly too close just in case something goes wrong. Now, in nature, there are animals that also do the same thing with visual cues. You've got, of course, the snakes that we just looked at for one, but you've also got these frogs, right? These very poisonous dart frogs, like in the Amazon. Some have these very high contrast, bright, vibrant colors that draw attention to it to warn people and animals to stay back, to stay away. So reds and yellows are really things that can help us to, latch onto that to know. So again, just kind of like a bright red stop sign. Hopefully that's going to get your attention, and hopefully then you will stop. Now, here is something else with similar colors and markings to the Mentor. Let me know in the comments what you think this helicopter might have been used for. Think if you've ever seen these colors on something else out and about in your community, maybe. Looking at these colors, you might associate it with a certain type of vehicle, certain type of service that is on a car that's going around. Sometimes you might hear it before you see it. So looking at these colors, yeah, you can probably figure out that this was used to rescue people. First aid, exactly, Michael. Excellent in the chat. So, we've got these red and white colors. It is a kind of like an ambulance, right? This is a rescue helicopter. And again, in this situation, these very bright colors are easy to spot. They're easy to see up there, which is great if you are trying to rescue people at sea. And Andrea, yes, I see you said ambulance too. Excellent. So a really, really great color pattern here, again, to be able to see and notice them. All right, now we've got this plane. Not very bright, not a lot of vibrant colors. This plane actually never took off from the Intrepid, but we are very, very lucky to have it. We love this. This is the fastest plane ever built. This is the Lockheed A-12. It is a CIA spy plane, and it could go Mach 3. So that is 3 times the speed of sound. That's over 2,100 miles per hour. And it also went up really, really high. So this plane could go up to about 80,000 feet. So high, in fact, that the pilot who was flying in it actually had to wear a pressurized suit, just like the astronauts, in order to breathe. So a really, really crazy plane you don't want to mess around with. And Andrea, I see you said this is your favorite plane. Yeah, this one is a really, really cool plane, not going to lie. But no, this was used back during the Cold War in the 1960s. So now the main job of this plane, the A-12, was to spy on the Soviet Union. So its job was to go very, very fast, very, very high, very, very discreetly, and to take a lot of pictures while it was doing that. Now, of course, if I told you this was a spy plane and that this spy plane was actually camouflaged, well, you could probably maybe guess what time of day this plane might have been flown while it spied on the Soviet Union. It's all black. So yeah, it's flown at night, right? And because it went so fast and technology was actually getting so good, we stopped relying so much on our eyes to find planes and started relying on radar. But the A-12 was actually very special because it even has special paint on it that could deflect the radar too. So it would, the radar signal would come in, and rather than, bounce back off of it, it would scatter the radar, and it made it kind of appear that the plane was bigger than it was, or that it was moving at slightly slower speeds, or maybe even coming from a different direction, and it would confuse the radar. So again, this is also another type of camouflage. It is black, and of course, against the clouds, it really stands out. Went really fast though. But it also worked against the radar with its special paint. Everything about this plane is just so, so cool. Now, all of these camouflage strategies that we talked about, everyone, that the planes used were, of course, to make sure that the pilots and the sailors, the dazzle paint, right, were safe while they were on their missions. But now we are going to shift and we are going to talk a little bit about how sailors and pilots were able to keep their communications secret using codes. So we are going to talk a little bit about this place right here. So this is on the Intrepid. This is up on the flight deck. This area of the ship is something called the island. And that's where a lot of navigation and communications were based off of. They were all kind of in this one central area. Now, you are, up there, and that's where navigation is happening. So you're literally going to be steering your ship up at the helm there. But there's also an area up there where you're going to be doing a lot of communication too. And so this area in the bridge for navigation here, you can see lots of maps for plotting. You can see lots of instruments. You've got radar that can help us with navigation. It's a very busy, very, very important area. So lots of things to be looking at, lots of charts, lots of maps. And as we move closer to the front of this section, you can also see a board that is going to be on display. So you can see it in this picture, kind of right, I don't know if you can see there we go, right over here. And I'm going to zoom up on it for you here. All right, so if you look closely at this board, you can see some words on it. All right, so you can see some words like Intrepid, also New Jersey, Miami, Independence, Iowa. All of these different words on here. Interesting. Now, these are actually names of ships that are in what we call a fleet, or in a group of ships. So that's what a fleet is. They all stay close and they stay in formation to stay safe. Now, for a time, the Intrepid was also something called the flagship or the head ship in the fleet. So that's why you can see Intrepid right there in the middle of it all. And it's, effectively being protected by everyone else around it. Remember, the Intrepid had the really important job of having planes to take off and land from the flight deck, so they wanted to keep everyone safe, and no better way to do that than to be right in the center of this clump. Now, our ship is really, really long, remember. So imagine, you might be looking out in front, and it's maybe a little hard to see things. You've got planes all over the flight deck. They're launching, they're landing, everything's coming and going, all these people running around. So they really relied on their instruments to be able to navigate, especially if you're in the middle of the ocean. You don't really have things to base landmarks off of, right? So in order to communicate with people all over the ship, they had to use these things. Now, I know you look at this and, actually, many people don't have house phones these days, so this might look a little archaic to you if you're not used to that, but this looks like a regular, household telephone. But these were actually a little bit different. These are called sound-powered telephones. It looks like a regular telephone, but it actually uses the power and the physical properties of voice vibrations in order to work. So it's like, it's got vibrating wax paper almost in it to move it along the line so people can hear on the other end. So if you've ever done that thing, where you take two paper cups or two plastic cups and you put a string in between the two of them and you pull it tight and you can talk to your friends through it, it's exactly like that. The sound waves can travel through that line just that way. So by having sound-powered telephones, it actually added another level of security to any, messages they wanted to communicate to one another. Because talking over a telephone line, or, certainly like a cell phone today, you can maybe pick that up from a cell tower, but having it so that there's not really too much technology really involved and electricity, that sort of thing, it's a little bit safer. It's a little more secretive. So that's why they did it that way. Now, another way that's even less fancy than, wax paper vibrating is this thing. So they use these in between the decks. Maybe you've actually used one of these at a playground before. This is something called a talk tube. So it is a piece of metal that's shaped kind of like a horn or a megaphone. And you just talk into one end of it and your voice travels down literally this empty pipe all the way to the other end, which is somewhere else on the ship. And these are found throughout the Intrepid, all over the place. They go to, main communication centers most prevalently, but they're everywhere. And so you can see actually this image of this guy even today using something similar to that. A great way to not have to, again, use like cell phone towers or something. So really great for using to talk to people on board the ship, right? But what if you have to talk to people who are outside of your ship? Maybe they're on another ship. Well, of course, if you're trying to be secretive, you don't want to just go outside and, scream across out loud on the water, whatever you want to say, because someone's going to obviously hear you. And the person on the other ship actually might not even understand what you're saying and think that you're in distress or something. So maybe don't do that. But you'll probably want to use some sort of a code to keep your messages secret and then make sure that no one else can pick it up. And so that leads us to one of the most famous codes. This is International Morse Code. All right, so this is what it looks like. It is a system of dots and dashes that spell out letters and numbers, so you can spell out words and phrases. So everyone at home, I am going to play some Morse code for you now. Hopefully you can hear it. Do let me know in the chat when I test this out, if you can or can't hear it. But see if you can decipher what this says just using this key that you see on the left here. This is what you're going to need to crack the code. So listen to the dots and the dashes and find the corresponding sound, the corresponding letter rather, to spell out this word. All right, now to give you just a little bit of a hint here, so you know what you're listening for. This little blip of a beep here, this is going to be the dot. Ready? And let me know in the chat if you heard that. That again is the dot. Oop. All right, so that dot sound is what the dot sounds like, and the dashes are going to sound like this. So you see that dot is just that boop, and then the dash is longer. Thank you for letting me know you heard that. Excellent. All right, so I am going to spell out a 3-letter word for you. Listen very carefully to the dots and the dashes and see if you can figure out what word this is. Write it in the comments for me. What word am I spelling out in Morse code? All right, I will play it a few times for you. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to do it again. Here's the first letter. All right, so that was the first letter. Doot, 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 doot. One more time. Here's the first letter. All right, second letter. One more time. Here's the first letter again. All right, so that was the first and the second letter. And here's the third letter. All right, so I'll play it for you one more time. Sometimes it's a little tricky and it's a little complicated to hear this all. But imagine people getting streams of this much, much faster even and being able to decipher this very, very quickly. This whole, the telegraph was invented in, I think, like the 1800s. So this became a very, very popular form, this Morse code. Samuel Morse invented it. He was actually a New Yorker too. All right, so here we go. That was the first one. Second one. Doot, 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 doot. Okay, and the third one. Ooh. Sorry about that. One more time. Here's the third one more time. All right, so first one goes Second one is Third one is All right. So we'll give you a couple more seconds, see if you can figure that out. Again, this is a 3-letter word. One more time, I'll clap it out for you. That was the first one. Second letter is Third letter is All right, any guesses? If you're having trouble figuring that out, I'll give you a little bit of a hint. The hint is that this is a command that you might give to an airplane. All right. So everyone, the answer is fly. Fly. The word is fly. So I'll play one more time for you. See, keep your eye on the letter F right now and see if you can bounce around. F L Y. You got F for the first one. All right, Michael, no worries. It's a little tricky, I know. This is someone's job, so they get paid the big bucks to do this. So one more time, here we go. Take a listen and see if you can see it matched up with the code. All right. Very good effort, everyone. Thanks for playing along with me. All right, now Morse code is one way that we can communicate with other ships, but there is another way using flags. Now, often you might associate a flag, with a country, right? And in a way, I guess you could say that it is kind of like a code, right? It's like a symbol that represents the country. But ships actually use things called signal flags that can send messages. Each flag represents a letter or a number as well. So these actually just get hung out on a line, just like you're hanging out laundry. You can see this ship here that actually visited us while they were in New York City. You missed the L, Andrea. That's all right. That's all right. You can always go back and experiment with that later. So this was a ship that actually came to visit us at our pier. We oftentimes get visitors. Fleet Week is a great time sometimes when they bring in ships to, people can come on and explore them. But you can see all these colorful flags hanging up here. So these are part of another form of code. And here is the key for these signal flags. So take a look at all of these. Maybe this one will be a little bit easier because you don't have to listen to it and I'm not dealing with technology and clicking buttons. But here's the key for that. Take a look at all of these flags here, these colors and symbols. And I will ask you another question now. I'll make this a little bigger for you as well so you can see it. See if you can find the corresponding letters for each of these flags and let me know what the message says. All right, what does this say? See if you can decode this message. So I'll give you a few minutes here. This is 3 words. All right, 3 words. See if you can figure it out. It is a common nautical saying. You might even be able, once you start to get it, you might even be able to take a guess. So let me know in the chat once you have figured this one out. Also, what's kind of helpful is that when you've got letters that are the same, that's one less thing that you have to look up. So for example, you've got the same letter twice in the first row. You've got the same, 2 of the same letters, 3 of the same letters, 2 of the same letters in the second 2 words. So see if you can figure that out. Put that in the chat for me. I'll give you a few minutes to figure this one out. All right. And it looks like we have a winner in the chat. Excellent, Michael. It says, dun, 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 full steam ahead. All right. So do we all see that? So you've got that white one with the red diamond in it. That's F. You've got the checkerboard red and white one. That's U. The checkerboard yellow and black ones. That's LL. Excellent. And then, of course, STEAM, STEAM, ahead, AHEAD. Good job. And I actually found myself, I was doing another form of code. This is sign language here. So there you go. You've got full steam ahead. Wonderful. Now, here is another one. Same code. What does this one say? This one's actually on the Intrepid too. So see if you can see what this one spells. All right. So again, this one's maybe a little easier. Look closely at the letters. There's only 4 letters here. What does this spell? See if you can put that in the chat for me. And as you're figuring this out, you might think I messed up. Maybe spelling isn't my strongest suit, but nope, it's right. What does this spell? Tell me in the chat. 4 letters. What does this one spell? Got the first one, some blue and white checkerboard. Andrea for the win. NB QK. Well, that's strange, right? Why would that be on the Intrepid? Well, that is actually Intrepid's call name. It was another nickname for the Intrepid. It was a code name, a secret name that was used so that others wouldn't know which ship was talking or being talked to. So it's a spy name, it's a code name, it's a nom de plume, it is a stage name, I guess. So that actually added an extra layer of code to your code. So that makes it even harder to crack. So imagine you already have to crack the flags, but then you got to crack this other code as well. So great job, everyone. Thank you for playing along, for helping me crack all of these codes. So, looking at all of these codes and this camouflage, you can really see how they really thought about this. They put a lot of effort into making sure that they kept themselves and, of course, their pilots and their sailors safe. So, really important stuff here when talking about espionage, talking about being out at sea, talking about communicating in between ships and planes and things. Before we wrap up for today, though, I do want to see if we have any other questions. So let's see what other questions we got for today. Do they still use codes in the military today? So yes, absolutely. They still actually use signal flag code, believe it or not, and they use Morse code too. But of course, since it's been around for a while, everyone knows them by now. They use the codes in their own special way. So again, there's codes within the codes, right? And for instance, with the signal flags, the letters, if you actually just take a single letter, that actually means a whole phrase now as well. So if you ever just see one flag waving up there, it could mean, someone went overboard or that they need more fuel or something's on fire. That's one of my favorite ones. It's kind of funny. It's literally, I am on fire. So definitely, they still use a lot of codes just like that today. And of course, we've seen amazing movies of, the Enigma machine and all these other codes that they've got as well. These are just a few that were common in the Navy, though. Great question. All right, any others? Are Avengers still flown in the Navy today? So no, the Avengers were entered in service 1942, I believe, so during World War II. And then they were used until the 60s. But by then, of course, technology had improved so much. We had these jet planes. They were so much more effective for what they were trying to do. So the Avengers were either scrapped or, just sold off. But a lot of them found new life, believe it or not, helping to put out forest fires. As a torpedo bomber, we talked about that. They could carry all of this weight, all of this water. So really helpful for dumping water on fires in forests. Wonderful reuse there. Also, they would put pesticides in them to, go out into the fields as well. And then, of course, you also have, your plane buffs who got their hands on them. And now they use them for demonstrations at plane shows and all sorts of things, too. But no, the Navy no longer uses them, though. Yep. All right. And how many planes do you have at the museum? I believe we currently have 28 military aircraft on display. And then, of course, we also have a few other things. We've got British Airways Concorde, which was a commercial jet. Then we also have a submarine, Cold War era submarine Growler, which is really, really cool to explore. And then, of course, the NASA space shuttle, the Enterprise. All sorts of fun goodies like that. And then, of course, it's all housed within the Intrepid itself, which is itself a National Historic Landmark too. So much really cool, fun stuff to see. Lots of technology, lots of really, really exciting things to come visit. So we hope you can come visit someday soon. All right, my friends. So if you have any other questions about our programs, you can, of course, reach out to us through our website, intrepidmuseum.org, or also through our social media platforms. Thank you so much for watching today, playing along with me today. As you know, the museum has introduced a number of new live streams just like this one. So please do follow and subscribe to this channel, or also visit our website for the latest streaming schedule. So our museum is back open to the public Thursdays through Sundays from 10 to 5 p.m. So if you happen to be in the neighborhood or passing by, we would love to have you at the ship in person, where you can check out a number of these really cool spaces and planes and some techniques, of course, yourself that we talked about today. All right. So once again, I would like to thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we will catch you online for an upcoming program. All right. See you next time.